Well, thank y'all for having me. I appreciate having the chance to come and talk to you. My name is Mark Holcomb, Project Manager from Evergreen Solutions, and I have been engaged with the project from the beginning, leading it from our side here. And so I'm going to take the chance today to really walk you through the project. I appreciate the City Manager for giving us an excellent sort of summary there. I'll go to a little bit more detail, so if y'all have some questions, I'll certainly be happy to stick around and answer any questions that you have. Either at the end or if you want to flag me during, I'm happy to address that. But we will be covering a little bit of recap of the project. So sort of what were the goals at the start of the engagement? What were the steps that we actually went through to get to our recommendations here at the end? We will be talking about an evaluation of your current system. So that includes the data that we received from the city staff here, but also from employees. So we did come out in person. We talked to employees. We got some feedback from them as well. And then we'll talk about the recommendations that we got from the market data, and sort of what do we think that you all should do based on what we found in our analysis and the next steps as well. So go ahead and starting off with the study goals. With a compensation and classification study, there's really two main goals that sort of underpin everything else. And so number one is that we want to evaluate your system and give a review for the internal equity of that system. When we say internal equity, what that means is how do your positions relate to one another? So that could be two different people in two different departments doing the exact same work. We would hope to see if they're doing the exact same work, that they have the same pay grade, that they have the same pay available to them, they have the same title. Again, it may not mean that they take the same amount home in their check. Maybe one's been here for 20 years and one's been here for 2 years. But we want to know that the same options were available to them, given that if their credentials were equal, they would then receive that same pay. It could also refer to comparing different positions, though. So with internal equity, it's also important to note if you have a supervisor versus an employee, and the supervisor has additional responsibilities, additional tasks, additional leadership. If you've got different ranks, and maybe it's not a supervisor, just somebody doing more complex work, we want to reflect those things as well. So that's the internal equity piece of things, is before you even look at the market, sort of how does the system line up on its own. With that being said, of course, that second bullet, the external equity, is a critical piece of the study as well. So I know when people hear compensation study, they probably go right to the market and say, yeah, what are the peers paying and what should we pay? And again, that was a critical piece of the study. As the city manager mentioned, we did look at 100 different benchmark positions, so had a very robust sample there looking at the market. And so all of our recommendations then were really a combination of those two factors. So it's not just as simple as saying, well, the market says you're 5% behind, we'll move you by 5%, because we also want to look at the internal equity of that system and say, well, if we move you 5%, does that create compression somewhere else? Maybe instead of 5, you move 8%, or maybe you move 3%, or whatever that number might be. So again, we did try to keep both of those factors in mind, and our recommendations, again, that we'll talk about, do address both of those as sort of their key tent poles to keep in mind there. So with the project phases, then we really did have 4 main phases that we sort of divide our project up into. Phase 1 is all about data collection. That's what we call the outreach phase. And we do the project introduction. We start by talking, again, with your city leadership and HR team, collect the data that you might expect we need, job descriptions, org charts, employee databases telling us who works here, how much are they paid, job titles, things of that nature. So we get that information, we collect that, then we also, as I mentioned, come on site and we met with your employees to hear from them and get their feedback as well. So we did talk and have discussions essentially with, hey, what are the things that you like about working here? What are the things that maybe you have some concerns on? Do you all have any areas that you'd like to flag? If you want to let us know, hey, I think there's compression in my department, or hey, I don't think the titles are accurate in our department, they have the chance to point those out to us as well. But lastly, they also had a job survey that they were able to fill out. Our job survey tool is called the JAT, Job Assessment Tool. So if I refer to that JAT again, that is the survey employees filled out. And again, that gives them a chance to go into a little bit more detail about their position. So the JAT actually lets them say, well, my job description says this, but I actually do that instead. So they're able to cross things out, they're able to add new details, they're able to make some edits or changes there as needed. And so that JAT really helps us to give an individual review process or an individual analysis to each of the people in the study from that internal perspective. The second piece of the study then is reviewing the data internally, so reviewing everything that we collected in phase one. So that includes, again, what we collected from city leadership and HR, but it also includes reviewing those job surveys. So in phase two, we actually try to really get as much familiarity as we possibly can with your organization. Again, reading through, well, okay, the job title is this, and we sort of know what that is because we've worked with cities and counties across the country, but how is it different here? Every organization does utilize their positions a little bit differently. So we want to make sure we're giving employees essentially all the credit that they need based on the way that you all operate internally. It also includes that data analysis where we actually look at your pay scales, we look for things like compression, we look to see who's being paid at the minimum or the maximum of the range and kind of determine is that where we'd expect to see them based on the data shared with us. So that internal analysis is phase two. Concurrently, we do run phase three. There's some overlap there. So we start phase two, and after a few weeks, we kind of kick it into phase three as well, which is the external analysis. So phase three being that market analysis. It is the longest piece of the study in just in terms of the amount of hours it takes us and sort of the amount of time it takes to collect all that data, because we do reach out to your peers individually, we do talk with them, we sort of get their plans, their pay scales, their job descriptions. We review all of that versus your benchmark positions, again, those 100 positions. And we give every position an individual review to see what does the actual market look like for these benchmark classifications. Now, any position that's not included as a benchmark, it still gets analyzed by our system, but just as an example, you might have a position called City Worker 1 and City Worker 2. Well, we don't have to pull market data on both of those, because if we pull it on City Worker 1 and we find that it's below market, we know City Worker 2 is also below market, so we might adjust those two together. So just to clarify that is a common question we get is, every single position was looked at versus the market, but some of them got that sort of the indirect review by comparing with another benchmark. That brings us to phase four then, once the market is complete. And we do make recommendations based on the totality, again, of our analysis in phases 2 and 3. And so those recommendations, as I mentioned, sort of bring everything together. It also includes reporting things like this presentation here. It'll include things like the direct information we share with employees either later this week or the beginning of next week. And that'll be that direct information where we'll actually reach out to the employees individually and say, here was your previous job title, here's your new job title, if it changed. Here's your current salary, here's the recommended salary, to show everybody where they'll sit in this new system. So we did have a number of employee comments that we wanted to highlight. Obviously, we did have some things on the positive side. We had some concerns as well that employees shared. But again, this is all perceptional. This all comes just as sort of a high-level summary from what did we hear from employees when we came on site. And so that first bullet there really does highlight the retirement and health benefits. So again, when we said to employees, well, what were the draws to actually get you to come and work here? Or what are the reasons that you stayed here over time? Those are two of the things that they highlight is that benefits package. Probably not surprising. We know, municipal government tends to be better than, some other private sector organizations or some of the other options people might have. So the benefits being a highlight was definitely something good to see. Second there, we did have professional development. So again, some people highlighted this specifically, maybe more applicable to some than others, but we did have people saying, hey, I feel like I can develop my career here. I feel like I can grow and learn and actually set something up for myself for the long term. And then lastly, the work environment and the culture. Again, there were people highlighting, some people talked about their boss, some people talked about a coworker, some people talked about just their entire department, the fact that they enjoy coming to work with the people that they're working for. Some of the people who did have complaints in other areas said, you know what, hey, we do feel like this is an issue, but we like to come to work, we like the people that we work with. So those are the really main highlights that we want to pull out there. With that being said, of course, there were the concerns, and the number one concern that we had was with pay. Not surprising, given that we're doing a compensation study, but when we said to people, hey, what are your concerns? It was, hey, I don't think I'm paid enough for what I do, or hey, I don't think I'm paid appropriately given either how long I've been here or as compared to somebody else. And each different person probably had a little bit of a different take on that. But I would say, again, that was the number one thing that we heard was the concerns with pay. We will show some data in a minute, but again, this was the perceptual concern employees had. Number two was the benefits in retirement. Again, we talked about it in the positives, but I think on the concerns, some people kind of had the attitude of, hey, this is just not as valuable to me. I don't want the city to sit here and say, well, yeah, you're not paid what you think you might be able to be paid, but look at how good our benefits are. And so some people just said, look, I just don't think they're as valuable, particularly younger employees. We do know that's sort of a trend we've seen from our clients, as well as that you'll kind of read about nationwide. So that was a concern. Some people said is yeah, benefits are great, but what I really want is the pay, and that was sort of a concern there. And then lastly, career progression. So some people did share, hey, in an organization this size, if my manager's young, if a supervisor in front of me is young, et cetera, I just don't think I'm going to have the chance to grow because I can't promote. There's nowhere for me to go in my department unless this other person leaves. And so again, that's not necessarily uncommon in an organization your size, but that was something we did hear from some people about. In my specific situation, how am I supposed to grow my career? And so definitely something to highlight there from employees. There we go. So with the current system findings, again, this is an actual statistical review of your pay structure and where employees are placed within that structure. The main takeaway that we have on the strengths of the system is, again, your pay structure and your pay scale, it is logical, it makes sense. It gives you a good framework to work within. To keep in mind, we're talking about the structure of the scale. This does not have anything to do with competitiveness. But again, your scales themselves, as compared to some other local governments that we work with, you've got more consistency than some others, which is good because with a consistent system, you can actually go into that and you can say, hey, if we want to make an adjustment or a tweak, you can adjust somebody's pay grade, you can move the scale, you can kind of put people where they might need to be. So that's sort of what the top 3 bullets really get into. The progression over time that we want to highlight too, again, it doesn't mean every single person is exactly where we would place them. We'll get into that again with the recommendations, so talking about some of the compression that we did find. But we did see overall that your employees do tend to move through the scale. Essentially, the ones closest to the maximum are typically the ones who have been here the longest. This does look at sort of the base pay and the salaries in there as well, but the longevity, again, is another point for that. Is you all do have a system in place that does tend to reward employees over time. So if we have your scales in a market competitive place, you've got a good foundation to keep people where they're supposed to be. With the concerns at the bottom, we talked sort of really about the 2 types of compression that we did see a little bit of. I don't want to overblow this because, again, we've certainly had clients with a lot more compression than what we saw here. But we did see some pockets of compression and really of both types of compression. So one is called range compression, and what that means is essentially if you look at a pay range and you say, hey, are the people who are at the top of the range, again, have they been there the longest? As I mentioned, for the most part, you did see that to be true. But there were some pockets, again, that I can't comment historically on exactly what might have happened or what caused it, but we did see employees who have been here between, I think, 10 and 20 years, the ones that are seeing a little bit more of those areas of range compression. It could be because of a historical reason or trend, but again, I can't comment too strongly on that of what caused it. But we saw a little bit of that, and so with our recommendations, we'll touch on that. The other thing we did see a little bit of was the rank compression. So essentially, the spacing I talked about with the internal equity at the beginning is, do we have enough space between either a supervisor and an employee or a higher level job and a lower level job within an department? So that rank compression as well, there was a little bit of that we wanted to address with our recommendations. So we'll come back to both of those at the end.
Before you leave that slide, can you go over progression over time one more time?
Absolutely. Yeah, so the progression over time, and when we talk about this bullet here, what we do, this actual analysis that's referring to there is, we look at the employees who are in quartile 1 of the pay range. So the quartiles of the pay range, for again, anybody listening who doesn't understand, that's the first 25% of the pay range. That's quartile 1. So that means the people who are at the minimum up to about a quarter of the way through of that. So when we say, correct, citywide. So when we say quartile 1, the average was 3.1 years. That's your citywide average. And that means of the people in quartile 1, they've been here an average of 3 years. That's good because, again, the people who are new, we'd expect to be at the beginning. Quartile 4, the average is about 25 years. Again, also good at showing that the people who have been here for a long time are typically closer to the top of that range. Does that make sense?
Tracking.
Okay, perfect. So that was all internal, the results there are the sort of analysis. Let's talk about the external market. So again, with the external market, we did get 14 different organizations who were able to provide data on the timeline we were looking for. They're listed off to the right-hand side. So again, organizations from across the state, many from your local area, and then a couple as well from Georgia. Off to the right, the number shown there is the cost of living number. That essentially just shows the relative expense to live in the organization, here versus some of these other places. So a higher number means it's more expensive, and a lower number means it's less expensive. And so again, the important thing is not necessarily, is it 90, is it 100, is it whatever. It's how do the two numbers compare to one another. So just to use one example, again, you'll see Chattanooga is about 4 or so percent more expensive than it is here. So that's going to show that cost of living is about 4% higher there. So we did adjust for cost of living for each of these organizations. We'll show you on the next slide the net effect of that cost of living adjustment. Again, it wasn't a tremendous effect, but I do think it gives you just a tiny bit more accurate of a picture with that adjustment in there. At the bottom, we've already referenced a couple different times. We have 100 different benchmark positions. We got an average of more than 7 matches per position overall, which again is a strong match there. It does show, as we looked at positions and as we looked, sort of job description by job description, we don't want to have a match from every single organization for every single position because not everybody does things the exact same way. So we were able to be a little bit more precise there by making sure we matched just to the other organizations who we felt were performing the same level, the same type, and the same scope of duties that you all have. So with the results then, up at the top you'll see really 6 different numbers. The 3 on the left in the white background, those are the unadjusted numbers. That's the unadjusted, just the raw numbers without cost of living. The ones to the right-hand side in the green are going to be the cost of living adjusted numbers. And so you can see, if you look at the unadjusted numbers, you start off at the market about 10% below what your peers are paying. But when you cost of living adjust, it gets to about 8% there, 7.8 I think to be exact. And so again, what that shows is when you take the cost of living into effect, this makes about a 2% difference there. But you all are about 8% below the market average at the starting point of your range. When you go up to the max of the range, it's about 5%, so still behind. But again, you do catch up just a little bit, which shows you have ranges that are just slightly wider than what your peers are offering. And so again, this does indicate a market gap, a market differential. But the important thing to note is these are the average results, which means some positions actually were even further behind than this, but other positions were in a pretty fair or pretty competitive placement. So I don't want anyone to leave here thinking, oh, well, every single position was the same or every single position came out 5 to 7% below. But again, there were certain positions that needed to move more than that, and some other positions were in a more appropriate placement here. One thing I will share as well, it's not on the slide, but again, the actual salaries that were paid to employees were a little bit better than these numbers here. I think they're about 1 to 2% below the market. So again, that does go back to that slide we talked about progression within the range. Is your employees have progressed slightly further than they would have at peer organizations. So while you might see a 7% difference in the middle of the range, if you all are moving people through a little bit quicker, that means you do make up some of that market gap over time. Again, still showing a market differential. Y'all, we're still below that market, but only by a couple percentage points there for the actual take-home pay. Sorry, it's not clicking. There we go. Okay. So for the recommendations then, we've got 4 main recommendations that we want to highlight. Really, again, at a high level to kind of talk through, and I'll spend just a moment talking about each one. We can certainly dive in deeper if you have any questions. But recommendation 1 is in regard to the pay structure or the pay scale. So the first thing we're recommending is making some adjustments to your pay scale just to bring it in line with the market. As we mentioned during the analysis, you do have a good structure and a good pay scale, so we're not recommending to throw it away. This is more so about tweaks to that scale, again, to bring it into market competitiveness. Which pay grades you're utilizing to make sure that you're going to start at a competitive place with the minimum of the market, and also looking at the top of the scale as well to make sure you have the pay grades in place to recognize people across the entire organization. So recommendation 1 is more about tweaking to get you in line with the market. Recommendation 2 then is about adjusting the pay scales for individual classifications. So that gets back to what I shared on the previous slide. If a classification was 10%, 15%, whatever, if the classification was further below the market, in addition to the scale adjustment, we might actually recommend that position adjust upwards by 1 or 2 or whatever number of pay grades. So again, a specific classification might actually move further in these recommendations than the average of all the classifications, because if they showed a further market differential, they needed a larger adjustment. By that same measure, if the classification was above market, we may have left them sort of right where they are, or sort of found a pay scale that was just sort of in that next immediate closeness there. We did not give everybody an across the board, just sort of, hey, let's move everybody together. It was individualized, where we said, hey, this position needs more, this position's doing okay. With that being said, we did reflect and respect internal equity in all cases. So again, part of the analysis was to make sure and say, look, if we move this position 10%, what does that do to their supervisor? What does that do to another position in their department to make sure it was going to be an appropriate placement and adjustment there? So that's all what recommendation 2 is about. It's about making sure your classifications are aligned correctly within the new pay scale. Recommendation 3 then is about the employees. So 1's the pay scale, 2's the positions, 3 are the employees themselves. So when you move into a new system or a new scale, you have to figure out, how do we put employees into this scale? The simplest and sort of easiest way is just to look at the employee and say, hey, are they above the minimum? And if they are, we don't adjust them any further. But we didn't want to just stop there. We did want to look at some other options, because we talked about compression earlier on. So this is where I'm kind of coming back to that compression piece, is making sure we have a recommendation to place employees not just in the correct pay grade, but in the correct placement within the pay grade was important as well. So what that means is we did look at what's called a parity adjustment. I'll touch on it in the next slide. I have some more details. But that parity adjustment does essentially say, how long have you been in your classification? And then gives you a projected salary based on that number, to make sure, again, that we've got one person who's been in their grade for 10 years, one who's been in there for 1 year. We want to be able to show some differentiation as appropriate. So again, the next slide touches on that in more detail. But I do want to hit on recommendation number 4 before I move on to that next slide. So recommendation number 4 is essentially something the city manager already covered, but I want to re-emphasize that here, is continuing to monitor the market for movement over time. Now we know in normal times, when I say normal times, I'll say maybe before 2020, 2021, it was still important to look at the market. It was still important to pay attention to what people were doing, but you'd sort of see more of a logical sort of progression over time, and people would move a few percentage points a year, and you maybe could predict what that might look like a little bit better. Since 2021, it might be sort of anybody's guess what organizations are going to do. There's been a lot of inflation, obviously, a lot of market movement, and while we are starting to see the general market cool down, in general, again, our average increases that we've been seeing in our market studies, as well as our recommendations, have been going down relative to 2022 or 2023. There are definitely still some pockets that can be very hot and can move. Again, it was directly referenced here and addressed, the public safety positions, and in particular, a few of your peers here, who have made very aggressive moves. So what I want to emphasize is we did look at that. We do have recommendations for you for those classifications that we believe are appropriate as of right now. But as your peers continue to adapt and respond to the adjustments that may go through from those local peers, I do not want to sit here and give you the impression, well, you've put people where they need to be, they'll probably be good for another 3, 4, 5 years. It is very important to keep an eye on this. We do expect there to be some movement. And again, as the city manager mentioned, we are on contract for another year to assist with questions like that. So again, if the city wants to reach out and sort of say, hey, Mark, here's what we're thinking, here's what we're looking at, what does this mean to you? Do you have any recommendations or advice? We're certainly happy to assist with that as well. So just wanted to touch on that before we move on to the detailed employee-based adjustments. So for the employee-based adjustments here, again, we're showing 2 options there. The first one is the one I alluded to before. That's sort of the option that talks about how expensive are the pay scale adjustments themselves. So if you just did the pay scale and you did nothing else for employees, that would cost the organization about $200,000. But the downside is, again, that would create additional compression within the organization, because as you move the scales and you don't move the people, it bunches people up at the minimum of the scale. So that bring to minimum option is not what we're recommending, but we did want to show it because it's important to say, hey, that's sort of the starting point, is adjusting the scales. There's the cost there. That second option, that class parity option, coming in at, again, a little bit more than $500,000. Those are total reoccurring salary only dollars. But that $500,000 adjustment, that's the adjustment to look at the projected salary for individuals within their recommended pay scale and actually put them at the correct place versus what the model says. Now, to emphasize, we give that projected number. If an employee's salary is higher than the projected number, we do not recommend decreasing the employees. That's an important thing to note. If you're above the model, you keep your current salary. But if you're below the model, you do get moved up to that recommended and proposed salary adjustment there. So that's the class parity approach. It does focus on time within your own classification because, as the city manager mentioned, that longevity payment would be factored in as well to actually look at how long you've been with the organization. So this is classification based, which means, again, if you've been promoted and you've been in your role for 5 years, you would get those 5 years of credit and be adjusted on that basis here. So again, that recommendation, we believe, would put everybody in a market responsive pay scale as of now, and would make sure they're hitting at least that market responsive salary for each individual employee. Again, that was looked at for every single employee across the organization, and that cost, that little more than $500,000 is where that cost comes from. Sorry. So for the next steps, we've touched on these a little bit here, but again, that top one is, again, selecting the preferred implementation plan. We've made our proposal, for you here today, and again, worked with the city manager and a few other individuals here to make sure we feel we've got a good approach to go forward with. As soon as we get the green light on that, we'll start communicating those results out to employees. So as was mentioned here, Evergreen will reach out directly to employees with an email, or if an employee for whatever reason does not have an email, we'll either send it to a department head or a supervisor, say, hey, can you please communicate this to the employee who reports to you? So those should go out to every single individual within a week. When we communicate those out to employees, they will have the rest of the month of September to reach back out to us. There's going to be a link in there for what we'll call an appeals document, where they're able to actually flag that and say, hey, for whatever reason, I don't think this is the right salary for me. Just to give you an example, I worked on one for a different client last week. We had some appeals that were submitted that said, hey, you gave me credit for 5 years in my job, but I've actually been in this job for 10 years. We reached out to HR, we talked to them, and they said, oh, yeah, they have been in the job 10 years. That was a database error, so we corrected it, and the employee got a new salary. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking for here. If an employee has any additional information to share, we're certainly happy to take that. They're able to provide that information, say, hey, I think my job's wrong because, X, Y, Z. If an employee just reaches out and says, well, I want more money, can you please give me an additional increase? Again, we would respond with a decline on that appeal, because this really is a process for correcting anything that was missing or pointing out additional data points that we may not have had access to. So again, that appeals would be open for several weeks for the employees that have the rest of the month of September, and then we would respond to the city in early October after reviewing those appeals individually with a recommendation for each one. The only other piece that we sort of have as an outstanding deliverable then are the classification descriptions. So those class descriptions are going to be based on the JAT surveys that employees provided us. So as I mentioned at the beginning, or maybe sort of towards the middle of the presentation, we talked about that JAT survey. Employees had a chance to go in and flag things in their job description that are no longer accurate, or maybe things that are new. If they wanted to say, hey, I do this task now and it's not in my job description. Some of those would have resulted in new class titles for employees, so we did recommend changes to a few of the classification titles. The majority of those, though, of course, employees will keep the same title because most of the titles were accurate, but they could still see an adjustment to their job description or class description, if you will. And so those would be provided to the organization, again, somewhere in that October-November timeframe to be distributed out to employees. we do provide those and sort of flag the things that we change so the department is able to look at that individually and say, does this work for us? So even the original job survey did have a chance for supervisors to weigh in and give comments, but when we provide the class description back, the departments, once again, will be able to approve those changes to make sure that we're not going to recommend anything that's going to hurt department operations or throw a wrench in anything that they're doing. So those recommendations will be provided in the next couple months. And then the last thing is that ongoing item. So that's really about helping the city address any questions or any things that come up along the way. Again, which we talked about, one of those is some of your peers making sort of unexpected or larger than expected adjustments. If those things come up, we are here to assist the city. We do have sort of some working files and databases that we can have. So if the city says, hey, if this happens or if that happens, how would we adjust? We are able to make those recommendations nimble to sort of assist the city in that way. So I think that's it. Yeah, that's the content I had today. Do y'all have any questions or anything else I can address for you today?
You talk about the market.
Mm-hmm.
What is the market?
So the market are these organizations right here. Well, there we go. Sorry, this clicker is not quite going. There we go. So those organizations over there to the right-hand side are the market peers that we looked at that did provide data, provide job descriptions, and let us sort of go through their information and make those comparisons. So, oh, go ahead. Do you want to add something?
So when you go to the market
Mm-hmm.
and you're looking at pay,
Mm-hmm.
job title,
Mm-hmm.
benefits,
Mm-hmm.
did you make any kind of recommendations on the benefits that we have as they compare with the market?
So we do have a benefits analysis as well, although benefits are a little bit different than compensation in terms of the recommendations that we can make. So just for example, again, if we see that you're paying 5% less than another organization in pay, we know that you're a little bit out of competitiveness there. We'd say, hey, the pay is a little bit lower here. On the other hand, if we look at something like healthcare, there are some additional factors that would weigh in, such as the deductible, the premium, the percentage the organization pays, the actual coverage, the doctors that you have available to, et cetera. So we did provide a detailed benefits summary to the organization that can be used to address and adjust benefits. Overall, you did have a competitive package, but there are things that can be looked at and can be adjusted there as well. The costs and the recommendations that I've shared today in the presentation do relate to salary only, but that benefits analysis was done and it was shared with the city over the last few weeks here.
Okay, when you talk about benefits, health insurance, pension plans,
Correct. Along with time off is the other major
vacation, time off,
benefit.
all that,
Mhm.
compared.
That's correct.
And a great study, and it sounds, but it's a lot of information for everyone to take in a matter of a few minutes.
Mhm.
And if I'm an employee, and I've been an employee before, I guess the bottom line I'm looking at is how much do I make?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the communication within the next week. So when we reach out to employees via email, it will have some of this summary information here. It will cover some of this of, hey, we did a study, here's some of the results we found. And then at the end, it will say, and here is your exact recommendation. So it would say, hello, David May, here's your current pay, and here is your new pay. So you'd actually be able to look and see the exact dollar amount that your pay would change in those recommendations there. If your title changes, it will be flagged in there as well. If your title stays the same, it will confirm, here's your old title, your new title is the same. So those details will be provided to employees within the next week.
And you talk about compression, that's an ongoing problem. When you've got an employee that is in one job and he's been there 20 years.
Sure.
And you may have a supervisor that's only been there 2 years. Well, the lower job title is actually, he's making more than his supervisor. And, that is an ongoing morale problem, I think. So, and I don't know how we address all of it. I know some of it we'll always have, but that's something that you're looking into, and when you talk about
That is correct, yes. So the recommendations, the class parity recommendation looks at where should you be placed within your pay range such that you are appropriately paid for the time that you spent in your job title here. The longevity recommendation that the city manager shared as well would address that with a longevity payment based on how long you've been here. But also on the bulleted slide right here, recommendation number 2 can also address that as well. So when we made recommendations for individual positions, some of the positions that we looked at could have said, hey, the supervisor here is only 1 pay grade higher than their employee. I think it should really be 2 or something of that nature. One of the other ones that we did look at again is we always look at public safety because we know those ranks can have compression between them as well. So we looked at, is there enough space between the ranks, and again, between employees and supervisors, between different ranks, but also just between 2 different positions in a department that might have more or less complexity.
But sometimes when you eliminate problem, you create a problem.
That is correct, and that's one of the reasons why we don't turn these studies around overnight. We took a lot of time looking and reviewing the different positions together, and so sort of saying, hey, if we make this adjustment here, what is the cascading effect across the organization? You're absolutely right. It does take sort of a subtle touch there to look at the positions, not just one-to-one, but sort of, hey, if we adjust these, how does it affect those over there? You're right.
Councilman Goff.
Yeah, just to follow up on Councilman May on the benefits packages, was his benefit suggestions not included in the scope of work that we hired your organization for?
So there are suggestions for benefits, but again, the suggestions are you fall below the market in this area, you should evaluate whether or not you want to adjust the benefit. Again, because of the distinctions and differences there, we did look at the comparability of your benefits to other organizations, but it was not in the scope of work essentially to analyze things like, again, the number of doctors that are provided by the healthcare, those kinds of things, which do make the benefits just a little bit further beyond. So there are recommendations about where you fall short from the market, but there are not recommendations to say things like change your healthcare plan or anything like that.
Okay, so from a high level, you feel like our benefits package is below or above the market?
I think it's comparable in most places, but I think in in particular in retirement, I think you're actually above the market. You're more generous than I think your peers were. So I would say overall, I do think you probably have a more generous benefits package than your peers do, in particular in retirement. And I think you're relatively comparable in most other places.
Okay, thank you. And I think it's been touched on, but I just want to for clarity, the class parity, the $522,000, this suggestion.
Can you go to slide 10? Well, the very thing he's asking about, I'd love to see. There.
So this suggestion takes into consideration new hires all the way up the hierarchy, and should take into consideration all time and rank potential problems along the way with any sort of compression issues.
So it does do that based on the classification time. So again, I don't want to present it as if it's 100% perfect. Let me give you an example of something that could potentially be missed. Is if you have somebody who came in from another organization, they may have 30 years of experience outside the organization. That's not data that we have access to though. So they might come in and say, well, pick whatever position you want. I'm a master electrician. I've been doing it for 30 years. But if they've only been at the city here for 1 year, they would be compensated for that 1 year here. So yes, it does look at the entire organization. It does look at every single position from the entry level all the way up to the very top position organization. It looks at the time in classification that they have, and it does make a sort of a recommendation to put them at their correct placement. One other example of something that it doesn't do, I mentioned this earlier sort of in a more general sense, but I will give a specific example. The other thing it doesn't do is it doesn't lower anybody. Now, we usually see that, we say, that's great, it doesn't lower anybody. But what that means is, if you're at your correct placement, and somebody else is above you, who quote unquote shouldn't be above you, because we didn't lower them, there still might be some compression in place from that employee who is placed higher than they would have otherwise been placed in the system. So, to answer your question generally, yes, it does look at everything. Is it perfect? Does it put everybody exactly where they think we should be? No, it doesn't, because there are some anomalies that will persist, again, because we're not taking money away from anybody, and because essentially we don't have everybody's perfect career history to factor in, which, just to be clear, would significantly increase the cost if we didn't have that, so.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Anyone else?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, when you're doing your study, at any point, did you see what percent the benefits are to the salaries?
So you're saying what percentage do you all spend on benefits versus the salaries? So
Correct.
I think we probably have that. I guess I don't have that number off the top of my head. I could follow up and provide that to the city manager if he wants to follow up with you if we've got that. But that is something we collect from peer organizations. Again, your HR, I think, would have that as well. I don't know off the top of my head, though.
And I'm trying to kind of get simple on a very complicated few minutes that I've seen. The market you're talking about, benefits to benefits. And when it gets to the pay, are you saying that you're an average of the market?
So our recommendations put you to the market average. That is correct. So that means you will be in the middle of those paying organizations coming back. That's where our recommendations put. You're not number one, but you're not at the bottom either. You are in the middle. It's the market average that we recommended for you.
Okay.
The one of the, oh, sorry.
Councilman Ness?
Yeah, that was my question. I got a follow-up on that, a couple other questions. So $500,000 a year to the budget to put us at average. I'd love to see a number to put us in the top 10%.
Sure.
Joe, I would love to see the benefit summary they sent you. The summary of how you assess our benefit package. Yeah, I'd love a copy of that. See $500,000 in a, I know you want to speak to that. Go ahead.
Yeah, in your memo, that's with the salary piece. If you add longevity and some of the retroactivity issues, for every dollar you spend for federal taxes and for retirement benefits, about another 25 to 30%. So we budgeted about $1.25 million. The total cost for the city is about $1.267 million.
When you say we budgeted, current year, balance of the current year, the last 6
Current
months
year.
of the fiscal year
Sure.
26?
In the current year.
So to move it even during this budget cycle,
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm asking.
Yeah, everything that's been presented with the longevity has been budgeted, and there isn't any new money that would need to be found.
And so when you talk about budgeting for fiscal year 27, we're talking about then moving from average to above average.
Then the whole process, budget process, looks at everything, and that would be
With the new
at time-
scales and the new grades. With what you're going to give us, is this broken down by sector? Public Works, Fire, Police, Admin?
for the benefits.
No, not benefits. For dollars. You said we budgeted this.
Yes.
That's everybody across the board.
It's
But we have
broken-
problems in apparently public safety.
It's broken down by
Okay.
by each department.
All right. One last question. I got a problem. I got the same problems that he's got in my job. Is overtime ever considered in any of your calculations? Or expected overtime?
So that is not something that, when we're adjusting the pay scale itself, again, we're making sure that you're competitive with your pay scale versus the other organizations. The other organizations will, I think, by and large, face similar issues with overtime. So again, they're also having to work overtime to pay more, et cetera. So I do think the recommendations would put you in a competitive place when it comes to overtime.
Making the assumption.
Correct, but
Okay.
we are assuming they're about the same. We did not basically say, this person I think will work this many hours, this person I think will work that many. We can do that very easily if that's something the city can provide, but that has not been factored into this point.
Thank you.
Yeah, longevity pay. So, are we talking about using longevity pay to, I guess, address some of these problems that we've got with the compression?
So longevity pay would help to address issues with compression for employees who have been here a long time versus a new hire. That is one of the things that yes, that would do. And so the longevity pay, it was something we looked at and talked about with the city as well. So with that recommended adjustment to the longevity pay, that's why we focused our recommendations here on the class
Are you
period.
recommending a higher number on the longevity pay?
So the longevity pay would double, that's correct. So the longevity pay would increase. So each person proportional to what they're receiving now, if that recommendations goes through, they would receive sort of the twice the rate that they're receiving now on longevity.
Yeah.
Then this recommendation would only look at their time in their current classifications. So looking at two different things, which again are designed to complement one another. We didn't want to double dip or essentially make a recommendation for, to address the same thing that was already being addressed.
When are you eligible for longevity? How many years in?
Anyone over 5 years gets a longevity pay. I mean.
And it's currently, what is it?
It's currently $75, and it would go to $150 per year at the city.
This is more, Joe, Sean, thank you for your foresight on fiscal year '26. I understand the longevity pay. Other margins that come up for fiscal year '27, I would love to see how many pennies that costs. When I say pennies, pennies of a tax increase. Beyond our standard operating budget. So
To implement what?
whatever suggestions are made above and beyond what you have said 1.26 million is allocated for this year. So I'd like to see pennies attached going forward so that we're very clear on
Yeah,
that.
and I think that what talked about with our staff internally is, as we talked this morning, is to really dig in and if there's other further adjustments that we have to make, is to do pretty much exactly what you said and bring those recommendations forward is what are the options to fund some additional pay, and what would that look like, and how, and what would the cost be, and what type of time frame you would need to do that.
And where would that put us in relation to the market?
And where it would put
Yeah.
you. So we talked this morning about doing that exact same thing next spring, as far as going through that process. It gives us 7-8 months to, I think, I can't remember what I said, but with Chattanooga doing what they did, you're gonna have Knoxville look and say, well, we need to be more competitive, and then Oak Ridge is gonna say, well, we need to be more competitive with Knoxville. I think you'll see some of an effect throughout the market, and, Mark can address this better than I can. I think we'll have a better idea when we get into the budget process next year, and if we need to do something, we've all, maybe, and figure out how to pay for that and do that. And I'm prepared to do that and certainly willing to do that. And is that a reality, or am I thinking that up?
No, absolutely. I mean, the information that we have right now, I think the question earlier was to put us maybe at 75% instead of the 50th of market. Yeah, we can go to see what would it look like to put you, or maybe it was even 90th, I don't remember.
I said 90th.
Excuse me,
That's all right.
I had edited it. So 90th, we can give you that number. That is definitely something we can do. That's one of the things that I mentioned with the year of support. If you have questions like that, what does this cost? What does it look like? So we can certainly do that. We'll work with the city manager and provide that, and y'all can have that discussion.
Bill, what you're doing is saying, establish the 1.2 as the base.
Well, I
And
think-
then we move up the scale from average.
I'm just glad that,
But that'll be from budget to budget, that we have to address that. But
Sure.
I've been a promoter, along with others, that we have an independent company as your company or other company, that we keep on retainer, that, and what Joe's talking about, the market, up, down, and the profit go up. And so that we don't get behind. I mean, we've done comp studies before, and and a couple of them was very expensive. And we got to that point, but you don't maintain them. And if you don't maintain them, then we get behind. And I think it's extremely important that.
How often do we do this comp study? Every 2 years?
Well, we've got a cost of living that we always get. And the cost of living is great, but usually you get behind on cost of living, especially when the economy is.
Joe, let Joe answer that.
Yeah.
Comp studies?
Yeah, we probably went, we fell into the category, I think we went 20 years without doing one, and then we've probably done 3 or 4 in the last 5 or 6, 7, probably 8 years or so. So we've gotten better at doing them, but but your articulation said is like everything was pretty static in East Tennessee for a really long time. And then you're seeing this across the country, and what you could probably attest to, is we've had to do them probably about every couple years to do that. So it's usually about every 2 years that we've had to address them, and we've seen pretty significant movement each time.
When you say static, you mean cost of living?
No. As far as for a long time, government positions stayed pretty similar as far as what the starting and the maximum pays were. And that's just the nature of going through recessions every few years, and you got ups and downs. Is so the positions stayed the same. When I came in, it was like 36-something thousand starting for police and fire, and now we're up 11, 14,000 from that in the last 5 years. So that's what the market's doing all around us. You go in the metro areas, and it's even more, is that this is a national phenomenon. It's driven by people not being able to hire, and people, both jobs are very, very difficult. You don't have as many candidates out there. I think if you went into Chattanooga right now, there'd be 75 openings, stuff like that. So, and I think that's what we're saying is this is the next evolution of that. We come back, we can look at the market, we can give different, if you want to what Councilman Estes said, if you want to put yourself at a different place as far as for particular positions or all positions, the information that Evergreen has can pinpoint and tell you this is exactly how much it will cost, and we can do that, and we're happy to provide that as we go through our budget process.
But I guess what I'm talking about, we wouldn't have to have a full-blown comp study every year.
Right.
The main thing is to look at the market, the pay, and so that we keep everything in line, and maybe from 3, 4, 5 years, I don't know, actually look at job titles and the task that within that job title.
That's exactly right. So we typically recommend looking at the market. So you should look at the market internally, yourselves, your HR, city manager. You should look every year. We do recommend a market study or analysis every 2 to 3 years to make sure that you're sort of looking more across the board. That's the market, looking at that, making sure you're staying competitive. Your titles, just to your point, your titles, your job descriptions, et cetera, those should probably be looked at about every 5 years, probably no more, because we know jobs do change. So about every 5 years or so. So again, you can get into a method where, hey, every 2 to 3 years you do a comp study, and then every 5 years you do a full-blown analysis. That should keep you in a pretty good position. The 20 years that was mentioned before, that's how you end up, we're in a hole, it's gonna cost a lot of money, we're having these big issues. So we certainly don't recommend that time frame. But yeah, the 2 to 3 years on a closed market analysis. If you want to do it every year, you can do that. Then you have to look at a smaller number of positions. So you don't have to do the full study, the full everything. But again, you pick those target positions. Next year we might already know it might be public safety, given the way that positions are moving again in Chattanooga and other places. But it could be that you'll see a position in finance or some positions in public works or recreation or wherever that might be. if you're having some turnover, if you're having some challenges there, you may pull in a few other positions for a more targeted market analysis, if you do one every year.
And that's what you all did, a full market analysis.
Here we did a full-blown market study. Yeah, we don't recommend, you don't have to go through this amount of effort every year. We would not recommend that. But yes, we did 100 benchmark positions, but every single classification at the city was looked at internally and at the market at least indirectly. So
Okay.
everyone was touched in this study.
Councilman Nestor.
I was listening, need you to repeat it. What will you be emailing city employees this week?
So city employees will get a, essentially a more detailed summary of what their individual adjustments will be.
Okay, so time out. Bringing to a minimum or for class parity?
For class parity.
Okay,
It
so
is,
you,
yeah.
we've already or
Well,
1.26 covers class parity.
correct.
Okay, tell me one more what's in this email.
So in the email, it would have a summary of, hey, this is Evergreen, we did the study with you, here's some of the steps. It'd be some of the stuff from this presentation, although again, we won't do 20 slides in there. But we would say things like, we're the vendor who did the compensation and classification study with you. Your overall market results showed you to be between 5 to 7% behind the market. The city is recommending moving forward with a class parity approach, which means we give that definition to the employees so they understand how their salary is calculated. And then it'll finish up and it'll say, your recommendation individually is, X. So it would say, your recommendation, you're currently paid $50,000, our recommendation is to pay you $54,000. It would have both of those numbers side by side for those employees.
Joe, I would love to see which positions are more than 5%. So on this email, hey, your position is below 5% where it ought to be, your gain. I'd love to see what,
Yeah, we'll, as we get everything, you'll have all the pieces of information.
I just don't want I know I've been getting phone calls and texts. I know more will come with the email. I need the information when they get it, or before.
Yeah, well, we talked about this with our senior staff this morning, and you will have all that information so you can have some context to address any questions that may
You
come.
told this to chiefs, both chiefs?
So Mark, that email will tell them their pay for fiscal year 26?
It will show them the Evergreen recommended pay for, this fiscal year. And it'll show them, it's currently this, and here's what we're proposing for it to be.
Will anything explain the longevity pay being increased?
That can be included in that email to explain to them the additional change there that will take place. I don't know that we have the exact, I'll have to get those rates. I guess if it's the 75 to 100, I don't think we've applied them individually to the people. We can do that. And we can say, your longevity is currently this, it'll be that. So if that's helpful, we can certainly add that to the email as well.
Would this letter also include how they go about making their appeal?
It would. That was the last thing I didn't quite get to. We had the question is, after the individual recommendation, so your recommendation is, your current salary is $50,000, your recommended is $54,000. It'll then follow and say, if you have any concerns with the data presented here, if you believe anything has been done in error, or if you would like to file an appeal, please click this link. We'll have a link directly to the appeals submission. So they can click that, file it, it'll go directly to Evergreen Solutions, and the appeal itself will have some additional instructions such as, if you have an appeal, please fill in this box, please give us direct input into what you think was mistakenly recommended or what information you would like to provide above and beyond what we have here.
Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've ever had that opportunity with an independent third party on a comp study, have we?
No, sir.
Yes.
If I receive one of these emails, Evergreen is recommending, I would love an email from the city following up. This is when it will be applied, or this.
Yeah, if at the end, if you accept this finding today, we will take we're prepared to take their exceptions and to make it final today. So what they send them is good. It's our recommendation.
So, I'd love to do it today. God, I'd love to see it.
In your study, you never look at benefits as percent of the pay.
So we do have a comparison, again, that looks at benefits as a percent of pay, but the reason why we don't typically make a recommendation based on that, it actually goes back to something your employees share directly. If we go back to this slide right here, the second bullet on there, I think is the key point there. Not every employee is going to value benefits the same way. And so if you have an employee who's retiring within the next 5 years, you might not care as much about salary as much as they do about that retirement, as much as the benefit, as much as that benefit is going to come to them. If you have an employee with a sick, spouse or child or themselves, they're going to care most about
Most
the
of
health
them
care.
think more about 5 years.
Well, and whatever the number is, whatever number of years.
Yeah.
But if you have a new employee who's struggling to pay rent right now, they're not going to be accepting to say.
Oh, young guys not worried about his benefit.
Correct. So we don't want to deflate
The
the
older
starting
guys, yeah.
salary based on,
We're all
yeah, you
that
have a
way.
better retirement, but if the salary's not competitive, we don't want to deflate the salary because your retirement benefits are higher than market average, because that'll make you less competitive when you're trying to hire the younger generation. So that's the reason we don't typically include that deflator. If you have better benefits, we don't deflate the salaries. If you have less competitive benefits, we would recommend you increase the benefits. But we do typically look at salaries and benefits independently, so you're competitive in both avenues.
Anyone else?
When do these emails go out?
So the emails are going to go out within the next 7 days. I mean, again, part of it depends on, did we have any changes that came out today? Do we accept this? Can we move forward with that? We're preparing to send them out probably as early as Wednesday morning, but we I don't want to commit to an exact day in case there's some different changes or something else that would come out. But we're scheduling sometime this week. And again, we're happy to do it as soon as Wednesday morning if that's something that we'd like to move forward with.
All right, this is really out of line, all right? I'd love to end our work session. Give city staff 30 minutes to get whatever they can by sector, by level, so we can see what the 1.26 is comprised of.
Is that possible?
We should have that at 3 o'clock. I mean, the vast majority goes to police and fire.
Yeah.
I'd say 80%.
I need to see that.
Is that agreeable with the rest of the council?
So, I mean, I don't think you need to stop right now. I just have to go down and print it off. I mean, we can.
Hey, we got some ribbon cuttings.
Yeah. I say
We
go
got some
for it, Joe. Let's go
annexations.
print it out.
Yeah.
We've got some concerned folks here.
Well,
Vice Mayor, I've got a question. We talked about, I want some clarity on this, Joe, maybe you. We talked about a process, going through a process, and we're sending emails out, but we're making decisions today as council, what we're gonna do, or I'm just, I think you're getting a horse before the cart, so I'm not sure to Dr. S's statement, not making a quick decision, but get feedback from the people also.
so are you gonna change the market?
Well, I didn't say change the market. We could change the market, but we're talking about getting input back from them also, and we're going to move forward. Is this, we talked about this year, we talked about 2026.
This is your study. You guys can do whatever process you want.
What's the city's recommendation?
Well, I think there has to be an appeals, before we know what any of the numbers are, you have to go through an
Correct.
appeals
But
process.
we're not making a decision today to move forward with this.
Let me speak.
Well, that's what I said. What?
It's under new business.
Let me speak for me. I appreciate Joe and then some of Sean, but mostly Joe talked to me about, because I was pushing about police pay, you know that. And he said, hey, we're already building it into fiscal year 26. We're not sure what it looks like until the pay stub. Joe's been very upfront with me about this. I don't know how much, right? Now I know today 1.26, but this is not new to me, right? I mean, the process, the planning for this year has not been new, and I don't think it's snuck up on city staff. I'm ready to move today. I just want to see what I'm moving on. I mean, I crossed that bridge a long time ago, right? That our budget had that much. You're looking at over 21 million is our payroll for salaries, just not benefits, just salaries, if that 2.4% is correct. So you're looking at $500,000 more on that. it's already absorbed in. You can't totally be fair. I get the longevity, that makes perfect sense, right? Especially for now. We can change that in next year's budget. You know, I appreciate the gaps within grades, or the gaps, you know, the steps within grades, the steps within intervals. I didn't really understand all of that and seeing that. And so I'm not going down that road with you. Let me just walk out of that. Let's just, yeah.
What you're asking for is the 1.26 broken down by fire, police, public works, administration.
Now, I've got to be able to answer questions.
By rank?
It's not hard.
Yeah, I know. I'd like to see
It
it.
shouldn't be hard. Let me see.
And in total, just a total for police, a total for fire, a total for public works. That's what you're asking for.
Yeah.
Is that what
And
you're
where does it
asking for,
move
Dan?
us on the COL, right? The comps.
So it would put you right in the middle, at the
Just
50th,
right at the
yeah,
50th.
right at
Okay.
the average, excuse me, not the 50th, not the average, this is just the median versus the mean. We put you right in the middle of, you know, all the peers you put them on, all in a spot, you're in the exact middle spot.
And you did plug in Chattanooga's numbers.
Correct, we did look at the Chattanooga numbers for the police and fire adjustment.
All right, if there's nothing else, and we could be provided with that by 3 o'clock for the discussion, is that possible, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, all of, the structure of it is pretty much a market-driven study that they've made the decisions on. My preference, and certainly it is your study, is to continue the process, to give people the information, because they will know more than anyone if there's an issue. Let them work through that, and it'll be finalized. And then we'll know what it is after the people that are intimately involved with their own salaries of what it would be. And I think that does that, and we can certainly provide any information you want. If you want to look at every single employee and make decisions on every single employee, that's within your purview. I don't think that's what you're saying.
I don't think that's what we
It's our study, I'd like to see it.
We're fixing to vote on it. I mean, I'd like to see it before we just adopt it.
Is it 2 more weeks matter to this? I mean, does it matter? I mean, instead of reacting real quick to this and look at feedback from staff?
Joe, this is, 1.26 is not budgeted to be retroactive
Yes, yes.
for the whole year. Then we could wait 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Let them get, to your point, the process, let the process feed itself out, that we can come back and if it's higher or lower, whatever it may be, we'll have a better decision.
And then,
Is the purpose of the appeals for an individual basis or to find a problem with the suggestion across the board?
The purpose of the appeals is essentially to capture any individual anomalies that we would see. Of course, if there's something to be shared at a classification level, we can look at that.
So there could be a discrepancy that's found, that would be an entire ranking system.
If there was something that was missed in the study, absolutely. it
Will
could.
we have the results, would we have the results back from these appeals within 2 weeks?
Well, we've asked according to our schedule right now, we've asked the employees to submit all the appeals by the end of September. That's, again, consistent with us sending it out this week. If we delay and we send it out this week, then it would not be done in the next couple of weeks here. That was just to make sure employees had enough time, in case someone's on vacation, or for the employees to take the time to look in their schedule at their salaries, to give them a few weeks there.
It'd be really nice to have those back and know that we really have a solid plan before we vote on what we're going through with.
The only concern I'd have with that is typically we don't send out appeals to employees until after we have the framework of a plan approved. Only because if we send out an email to an employee, and I'm not saying this is what anybody here is suggesting, if I send out an email to an employee, say your recommendation's $54,000, and then you all change an assumption, and you say, well, we don't want to do this, we want to do that instead, there is the possibility that 54 goes away. And so then an employee would have gotten an email saying, your
And we'd be
recommended
liable.
salary is.
When you send out to the employee, it'll be an email, you said,
Correct.
okay. Well, the only way that they can communicate back will be email.
So there's an online survey that we've asked them to fill out. We do also have our email and our phone number on the
So you
appeal as
will
well.
not have a person for them to meet with locally.
Correct. We will not be doing in-person meetings with employees individually. We hosted those in-person meetings at the beginning of the study, but we would not have that at the end here for the appeals
Okay.
process. Again, we're certainly happy to work with y'all if you'd like to add that on, but that would be an additional cost just for the travel up here and to have us sit for the day.
Yeah, if I was an employee, I'd want to have input in my pay. If
Sure.
it's 50, you say 54, and I think I need 56.
Mhm.
I would like to have that in consideration before council voted on it, and have the information and see if city staff, where we land at. I just don't want to go into a place where we're landing in fog and I don't have I can't see the runway. So therefore, for this process to work through, I would like to see this thing input back from what our employees, what they think they deserve.
Mr. Kimball, can you speak to the legal foibles that would come with that process?
Yes.
I think the consultant already just said you need a frame, y'all need to tell him what framework before he knows what to send to the employees.
Okay.
But I guess the framework we're working on is average.
The framework would be market average, cost of living adjusted, class parity approach, et cetera. Yeah, those are the things that we'd be looking for from a framework. That's what we have calculated out right now, and that's what the 1.26 is based on. But again, to take any examples you want, again, if you said, let's go to the 90th percentile, all of those salary adjustments are gonna change. If you said, take out cost of living, the salary adjustments are gonna change. If you said, instead of class parity, we want to bring to minimum, again, the costs are going to change. So, we look for that framework just to say, what are the parameters that we have set here? That's what, we've worked with the city to make that recommendation on those parameters. And then those salary adjustments as needed would really be, again, they're designed more so to capture things like the city's database says someone promoted, last year, but really they've been in the same role for 5 years. It was an administrative, title correction that really didn't affect their classification role. Those are the kinds of things we're looking to address. With the question that came up, or the comment, I think, that you made a moment ago about if somebody says they should make, instead of 54, 56, again, we'll take any input they want to provide. If they have additional data to provide to say, here's what we think it should be, we'll take a look at that. But again, unless the framework changes, we typically would have the data already input into the recommendation.
So we're going in 50% is what we're doing, correct? The framework?
Average.
It's not straight 50%, it's around average.
And then through that process, we can look at next year what Penny's proposal is, whatever, to try to move it a little bit more at that point. But right now, we want to try to have a reflection on their base salaries at this point in time.
What has happened, they have looked at the market,
Right.
they used their process to set all of the grades and levels based on that market.
Okay.
Then they look at every single employee and make sure they're put at the right place on their position. I truly don't believe that any of that can change with any fee. I mean, you guys can start moving employees and do that. That's within your parameters. I think what we're saying is the structure is there to accept the structure. If the council wants to say, we have more money and we want to do X, Y, and Z, then we can work with you to allocate that. I think we're talking about the inherent structure that's built on the market that was evaluated. Every grade was set, every position was allocated. Every employee will have the opportunity to go and challenge that. And from my perspective, then we come back. So, yes, I understand, and without getting in the middle of all the numbers and different employees, and, we try to not make this an individual thing, or, the structure is set. If there's concern that the structure is just wrong, then we should not approve. If we have confidence that Evergreen has the structure set correct, we should start the process. If you want to come back in November and or April and say, we want to do this, you know, there's other information on the benefits, you know, the market average for what organizations give for retirement is 8.39. The market average for salary contributed by the employee is 4.45, and we do 0, and we contribute about between 17 and 20%. So we're 12% above what the market is in retirement. There's a lot of points that can be discussed, and I think some of those probably should be discussed moving forward. But I think that what we're asking today is we can certainly provide what the breakdown is. That's pretty easy. Is if you want the process to continue, allow the process. If you want to stop the process, and go through and look at and make sure that every employee was put right and have those analysis, we're happy to continue the conversations over the next few weeks, but I think that's the only thing that you can really do.
Do we have to have a framework in place? Is that what you're saying, John, for us to move forward on that part? And then from that, we can evaluate after that, what the input is from the employees for the following budget year. That's what I'm hearing, correct? Yeah.
I'm okay with the framework. I think we just need to see the numbers.
Here's what, I'm gonna try to put my thoughts in just 3 quick points. Correct, either Joe, Mark, please correct me if I'm wrong. You want us to approve a framework that puts everyone at around the 50th percentile, a framework that's already paid for with fiscal year 26. Number 2, you want to add some longevity pay to all those employees as well.
I'm recommending that, yes.
Recommending. Number 3, we then would hopefully look at it in the short term, the next few minutes, but we also then would look at this again on fiscal year 27 budget in the next 8 months.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah, that's how we're operating today.
That likes clarity.
And we'll be looking in the interim for any changes.
Sure. And listening and getting feedback.
Yes.
Okay.
I still think we did a good job. Anyone else? Mark, we certainly appreciate the time and effort that you put into this, and appreciate all the work that the staff has done. I've been through several of these comp studies in a previous life, and they're not easy. It sounds like you've done a very thorough job, and we appreciate it, and we'll see what happens at 3 o'clock.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Would you like Mark to stay until 3 o'clock?
Beg pardon?
Would you like Mark to stay through the 3 o'clock?
Yes, if you can.
When's your plan?
I'm driving, so I can stay as long as you need.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much.
All right, moving